You're listening to Hall and Hud. Two guys talking about things. This show contains strong language. Listener discretion is advised. Let's start the show.
So, I have something special for you. I held off on this episode for a week because even though the Loki season finale aired on July 14th, I really wanted to get my good friend Hannibal Tabu on. So I waited a week in order to tape a conversation with him about the season finale, or the entire season really, of Loki, because he's a writer who loves writing good villains. And since Loki is such a magnificent villain, I thought it'd be good to have one of my friends who really appreciates good villainy on the show. Had some other people lined up, but unfortunately schedules could not match. Terry Huddleston's not with us this week because he works on the weekends now. He's off doing shows. So unfortunately, I'd only just had one friend on, but I think it's a really good episode. And I'm so glad you're going to be able to hear it now. Thank you for joining us on the Hallspace Podcast. Welcome to the Hallspace Podcast. It's about connections. I'm your host, Dr. Ritch Hall, and this is a weekly conversation about whatever and however I see to connect things. For people who want to connect, chat, and learn a thing or two about a thing or two. Without further ado, let's start the show. Welcome to the Hallspace Podcast. I'm your host, Ritch Hall, and I'm here with my good friend, the inimitable Hannibal Tabu. Say hello to the people, Hannibal.
It's very good to be here. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody.
Yes, and Hannibal has been my friend. We just decided for at least 16 years. We didn't quite figure out a date because it's fuzzy. We are internet friends. We met on MySpace, I believe, and yep. He has been a writer that I followed. I know that I met you because you were writing the column. Was it at CBR originally, or was it somewhere else?
Oh yeah, I was at CBR that was from 2003 until 2019. That was 15 years in and of itself. Yeah. So, you were a writer I followed on CBR and started just writing you on MySpace because you had a blog on MySpace. And then we connected, became friends, became a bit of a writing mentor to me. So whenever I'm in a writing log jam or need career advice as far as writing, I tend to call Mr. Tabu. And he gives, it's not necessarily harsh advice. It might sound harsh to some, but he gives very candid. We'll use the word candid advice. I mean...
So he can be very frank, and I've just learned that that's his approach. Is he's being frank. He's not trying to be mean. Don't take this personally, because it's often just solid gold advice. It just, man, yeah, he will crush an ego to give you the truth. He's
it's
shrugging.
Never personal. It's always business.
For those who can't see, he's Hannibal shrugging over there, which means there's truth to this. But yeah. So, and. Like I said, consider him a good friend, a great mentor. We've worked on a few projects that didn't quite see the light of day together. And now I have him on the show to discuss Loki, the Disney Plus show. And I definitely wanted him on the show. He was the first person I reached out to. Had a couple other co-hosts who fell through for time reasons and scheduling. But I definitely wanted him on the show because he's a bit of a Sith villain, a Sith Lord. So he tends to prefer the villains in a story, particularly when they have good motivations.
I've been called so many names, you know.
And I thought a show about a villain like Loki would be good to bring a person like him into because it gives a unique perspective. While most of us tend to root for straight up heroes, there's something about villains that we appreciate, even if we don't want to admit it. They often are charismatic, very entrancing figures. And so as a person who embraces it and as a writer himself who's written some stuff with some great villains in it, I thought it'd be good to have a conversation with him because the final episode of Loki gives us the true villain of the story with a very, mixed motivation, because in some ways villain or, guy keeping us all safe. And so
from a certain point of view.
Right. And so I thought to have that conversation, you just can't have it with someone who doesn't think like a villain. So to sort of examine the psyche of Loki and to examine the psyche of He Who Remains, played by, oh gosh, and now the writers,
Jonathan Majors.
Thank you. It was right there before I started saying his name and then it fell out of my head. But the amazing Jonathan Majors, who I met via Lovecraft Country, and he was also in Spike Lee's latest, what was that called?
The Five Bloods.
Five Bloods, yes. He was in that as well, playing a completely different character than if you knew him from Lovecraft Country. Definite range in this guy. Mm-hmm. So definitely looking forward to what else he brings to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as well as to the other projects. I'm just looking forward to him in other projects. So as we look at Loki, the show, what were your thoughts on Loki as a villain and his essential redemption via this show, from the first episode to this last episode where he meets a much greater bad guy?
Well, and I'm always careful about terms like hero and villain, mm-hmm. and the saving and destroying or whatever, because it's all really, as Obi-Wan, your so-called hero, said, it's from a certain point of view. Obi-Wan, the weaponized child soldier who radicalized a teenager and made him into a terrorist who killed 30,000 people in the Death Star. But anyway,
are we blaming Obi-Wan for that and not for the inherent darkness in Anakin's heart?
Well, if we really want to blame it, we can blame the Republic itself for its ignoring injustice and inequality throughout the galaxy, and the do-nothing Senate who cared nothing to do it. We're getting off track.
Right. Hannibal's very deep in Star Wars lore, so that's a whole other conversation for another day. But
the point being that Loki, what was most, and we're going full spoilers here.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't do this conversation without it.
What was most indicative to me was that Mobius said Loki was born to cause pain, and suffering, and death.
Yeah.
And he did all those things, but what Loki didn't expect was that he did it to himself. How many Lokis died there? How many Lokis suffered? How many Lokis went through it? And that prophecy came really 100% true.
Yeah.
A part of that reminds me of when I first saw the musical Wicked
interesting.
on Broadway, where this is not a character who woke up one day and says, I'm going to be a mustache twirling villain or whatever. This is a person who had a role placed upon them, who is like, you're a prince, but not really. You're good, but not good enough. You're this, but so a series of influences and societal stimuli drove him to become what many would call wicked. Now, is that good? Is that bad? Is that hero? Otherwise, I don't know. Ask me, ask Mike Brown, ask Sandra Bland. I don't know.
Yeah.
The point being that once somebody is in that role, people look at them worse when they're good at it.
Yeah.
And Loki's astonishing at it. He's amazing at it.
Yes.
And he takes great relish in this glorious purpose that he's burdened with.
Yes.
What he struggles with now, and what we saw in Ragnarok in particular and in this series, was his idea of accepting who he was outside of the labels that people put on him. And understanding who he wanted to be outside of the labels that people put on him, and figuring how that plays into the role that he's unfortunately locked into in this cosmology of Infinity Stones and Destro.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because Loki does come off as a person who's seeking external validation very much in the way that that's what sort of differs him from Thor in a lot of ways, his brother, whereas Thor was sort of motivated by, he got a lot of praise, but he was also motivated by a certain internal, I just like doing things and acting on my own admission. And, but Loki was very much, he wanted his father's approval. He wanted Thor's approval. You know what I mean? Like and yet was pretty insidious in his ability outside that realm of his father, the father-son dynamic. His mother seemed to care about him relatively unconditionally. And you see him in Ragnarok, as you just mentioned, he kind of worked his way into the Grandmaster's court. Like when you throw him into certain situations, he can earn the good graces of people because he enjoys that validation of getting people to laugh and smile. Or if you say, give him a mind stone, he also wants everybody to bow to him. Like, you know what I mean? Like he wants that external, everybody look at me the way I want to be looked at right now. I thought the show did a really excellent job of that. Like there were people I saw some reviews and they're like, why is he flipping out on the train and having this moment of joviality while he's on this mission? And it's like, but also that seems so very Loki. Like, hey, I'm having this moment where it's too quiet. I need everybody's eyes on me. Let's start singing old Asgardian songs and having a good time. Cause if nothing else, the world's going to end, man. Like, let's just make the most of this.
Smoke them if you got them.
Right. right. So I do think that's a good examination of his character. I thought they did an excellent job throughout the show. And, I remember because it was a time travel show, I started the first episode thinking that there were going to be little pieces of, somehow a time traveler went back to the first episode and there was stuff we didn't notice. They didn't really do that. They just sort of gave us these are the character traits of Loki. Like they broke him open and some of these things will make more sense by the time you get to the end of the story, because so much of what you look at as that journey is they laid out his psychology and then said, okay, these are the pieces to be looking for as you put this puzzle of the next 5 episodes together. And yes, the Loki they laid out in their very first episode, as laid out by Mobius, was the Loki we got in the very last episode, which I thought was, once again, for people who were going into this looking for a lot more Marvel spectacle, I think you got that, but you also got this examination of who this person is, particularly once removed from their world where they have a lot more power and authority and can call themselves a god. What happens when you put him in this situation with bureaucracy and a stark look at himself, and how does he then act as this situation unfolds?
Mm-hmm. And what was interesting to me there especially was the dichotomy that Loki wants eyes on himself, whereas He Who Remains wants nobody's scrutiny.
Yes.
Is not interested in anyone's attention or anyone's approval or anyone's thoughts, really. He's like, this is my job. I'm doing this job. And there was an old thing about a noir character who was like, this character was like, I'm here to fix the toilet. And if you get in his way, he's going to shoot you in the face, because he's here to fix the toilet, and nothing will stop him from doing it.
Right.
And He Who Remains ultimately embodied that kind of energy with the madness and the whimsy of somebody that's been doing this for so long that how people actually individually react doesn't matter. He's just like, oh, people are weird. I haven't done people in a while. Let's see what this does.
Yes. No, I was captivated by Jonathan Majors' performance for that very reason. He gave off this air of someone who's had literally thousands of iterations of conversations, and he's just going wherever he wants to go in this conversation. And he's going to give you information, but also like, let me find the most interesting way to say it. And as a person who can be mercurial in conversations that often do not call for it, I just appreciated the whimsy, as you called it. He's up, he's down, he's sideways. He's not sure where this is going to go. And he's just doing it just to interest himself, because at this point he's talked to so many people and he's done so much. Like, this is nothing to him, but also it's something to do today, So yes, the big meeting of He Who Remains, which I watched the Making of Loki special, and they talked about how they were trying to sort of subvert the Marvel trope of the last episode has to be the big action battle. And instead what they did was just the last episode's going to be a conversation.
Very personal.
Yes. Just 3 people in a room learning. This is what it's all been about the whole time. Very, I saw The Wizard of Oz in it very early. I mean, people brought it up. I'm not the first person to make that examination. Wizard of Oz / The Matrix. What was that? The second Matrix, Matrix Reloaded, I believe, where, you meet the architect and he starts speaking in words that are too big to understand on first viewing, because he's just talking so fast. But I thought Jonathan Majors brought so much to that moment. And then he himself said, he knew he was going to get to play Kang in another iteration. He's going to be coming back in Quantum Mania, the Ant-Man and the Wasp show. He's going to be coming back for that show. So he knew he's going to get to play it differently in that other version. But this time he gets to just sort of, literally chew the scenery as he presents himself as He Who Remains. And I was giddy when he came off that elevator, because I kind of thought Marvel has set up our expectations and dashed some people's expectations. If you look back at WandaVision, there were so many people who were so invested in the Mephisto reveal.
Unfair expectations.
Yes. And very often,
unfounded.
Yes. Marvel has built itself up to this point to be such an intricately laid puzzle. And as a writer, as a creator of things, I kind of see often where I'm like, oh, no, you're putting expectations on a thing that might not be there. Like, don't get those hopes too high up. But people really read into what Marvel's doing. And in that same way, I had lowered my expectations for who was going to come off that elevator. Like, I was just like, I thought it was just going to be another Loki. Like, literally, Loki's all the way down, just because we had been through so much Loki self-examination, right? That it's like, how could they give me anything but another Loki who's just like, oh, see, you got me. I was trying not to let you see me, but here I am. And then Kang comes off that elevator, and I'm like, oh my God. Much in the same way, I called that reveal, much in the same way that in Spider-Man Far From Home, they gave us full Mephisto in all his glory, which is such a comic book concept that I was not sure was going to translate on screen. When they gave us full Kang, like full Immortus, He Who Remains,
You mean Mysterio?
Mysterio, yes. I'm sorry, not Mephisto.
I was like, my brain like, oh crap, did I miss something?
No, you did not miss anything. That was me misnaming Mysterio. Mysterio was a concept that I was pretty sure was not going to work on screen, just because of how well they had grounded the Marvel Universe. But then they came off with a really good way of presenting it. And I remember when people would ask me about that movie, like, what'd you think of Spider-Man movie? Because how excited do you want me to be in this conversation? Because I'm going to get giddy about the fact that I saw Mysterio on screen with the glass dome. Like, they could have done anything with his helmet. They were like, nope, we're going to go glass dome and it's going to be cool. We're going to give you a good reason for it.
All on the table.
Right. And that, you know, we lived through the X-Men era where they couldn't wear the colorful costumes. They had to wear the black leather because that's cool. You know what I mean?
We lived through Cloud Galactus.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, Loki even pulled off with Agalith. They even pulled off Cloud Destroyer in a way that was still menacing and, you know what I mean? That pretty much, you know.
And comics accurate. If you look up Elias, that's very comics accurate.
Yes. So, yeah, no, I'm thankful to live in an era where we can pull these zany concepts out and people are like, well, I'm still with you, as opposed to I'm checking out. For those who've listened to the show before, my wife had this whole thing against The Rocketeer because she had never seen it. So she was like treating it as if it was this goofy concept. And I was like, no, that's a solid film. You're going to have to watch the film and know that I won't reveal her thoughts on the film, but she has watched it and that'll come up in another episode. But some of these concepts, when you talk about comic book concepts, people often balk at them because they think of them as silly or just sort of out there. But Marvel has done a really good job throughout their tenure of making these concepts work for a general audience in a way that does not turn them off. And so I do have to appreciate that. So when they go full Kang, I'm giddy. Like, and Black Man Kang, like I'll take that. Black man, super villain, super smartest guy in the room, knows more than anybody will ever know. And willing to go to the mat for his ideals. I was like, oh, okay, you got me. And then Jonathan Majors kills it. Literally every moment he says a line. Every line reading was different and slippery and just interesting. So, yeah, that's my diatribe on Marvel going full Marvel sometimes and how appreciative I am to be able to see that happen.
I did hear some of the criticism that, oh, God, it was an episode of all talking and yada, yada.
Yeah.
But this was an episode of earned ending that between Ravonna and Mobius, between Loki and Sylvie, with He Who Remains.
Yes.
All of these things were earned things that built up. In episode 1, the second they said TV, I was like, Kang. I knew it because I knew we had to get to Quantum Media. I knew I knew the casting. I'm like, I knew we were going. What I forgot about Kang, which is fun to me, is that Kang is also Immortus, is also the Scarlet Centurion, is also Rama Tut, is also so on. So
Nathan Richards,
is really he's gonna clump this. He's gonna nutty professor this,
right?
And I'm all in for that. I'm totally in for that.
Right.
But as a single piece, this resolved everything that I thought it needed to in this central idea. Well, let me correct that. There's two things that I have questions about that I'm not happy about.
Okay.
One, where did the time bombs from the Rocks card go? That Sylvie dropped a whole bunch of time bombs, and I don't know where they went, and that was never resolved, and that bothers me.
Yes.
Two, at some point in the last episode, the TVA was reset.
Yes.
And I don't know when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about that. I mean, killing He Who Remains had to have started the multiverse spinning out of control in a lot of ways. It would have created the Kang that we now see the statue of.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to seen the transition. I would have liked to just even a split second of, people's face, kind of going over there.
Some visual representation.
Yeah. Those are the only possible things that I have a beef with this series, which I enjoyed a lot because I'm a comics fan.
Yeah.
And I recognize, I can't wait for the day when he's finally done and they're able to teach Kevin Feige's method in business schools.
Yeah.
That he started in 2006 and before with a plan that we're still doing the same plan.
Yeah.
To the tune of billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
That kind of patience, that kind of forethought is, in my experience in the business world, enormously difficult to find.
Yeah.
And when it's so enjoyable to so many people as well, that's a big ask and one that's miraculous to see.
Yes, no, he's done some miraculous things. I've appreciated, as a person from the outside, noticing how the plan is very agile. Like they know how to sort of go with what's working. They know how to drop things when they aren't. And yet it looks seamless. He makes it look easy from out here, but we can tell by all the other studios who've failed to replicate even a fraction of the plan, how difficult it has to be. Like, it's a tightrope. And even when you look at his journey, having to deal with Ike Perlmutter and Avi Reed, like, he had some roadblocks.
And Jeff Loeb on the TV side. The Netflix detour and those Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. problems that they couldn't resolve. Those shenanigans all around. Right.
And yet he's still been able to hold the movie side. And this is billions of dollars at this point, billions upon billions of dollars. And he's still able to get what he asks for, because he's still proving his weight. And that's impressive. Yeah. And I'm also very curious about, Nate Moore was not involved in this series, but he was involved in Black Panther, and he was involved, I believe, in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'm curious about what some of the proteges of Kevin Feige will be doing for the next 20 to 30 years, as they have learned under his tutelage and have been, essential in some of these wins. What's up for them in their next iterations as well. So, yes, all praise the great Kevin Feige. He can do so little wrong. And even when he does a wrong, he fixes it so quickly that we forgive him for some of the missteps.
Kevin Feige rope-a-doped us on Wakanda. He pulled a fast one on us with that one. Where he says, Wakanda's too complicated. We can't do that.
Yes.
When he was actually already working on it.
Yes.
I was like, I see you there.
Yeah. He actually enraged me with that comment. I remember being very upset that it's like, what do you do? What do you mean you can't do Wakanda? It's the best magical place. And then they do an amazing Wakanda. And I'm like, okay, I'll forgive you for that misstep. Maybe you were feeling differently then and you just needed the right plan.
Well, that's just the thing. He wasn't feeling differently. When he said that, it was 4 years into the pre-development of Black Panther that they had already done. He said that as a red herring. So we were so enraged that when the movie came out, we were like, oh no, we finna take grandmama to see this. We finna go back another time. Right. We gonna hang this $1 billion on y'all in 27 days. Right. And he just sat back, ha 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 ha.
Yeah, I saw it 7 times in the theater. I saw Black Panther 7 times in the theater because
I'm 4. And I've watched it on Netflix and Disney Plus.
Right. No, it plays in heavy rotation here. My daughter actually loves it, so it's one of her bedtime movies. But yeah, I went back to the theater so many times. It was the scene on the rocks, man. When they go to the falls and T'Challa is being sworn in, and I know people had issues with the dodgy CGI, but as a black man, watching all those black people come together in just happiness was like, I knew this was a world I wanted to be in as often as I could. And that's the first time I've seen a movie that many times in the theater, since I was a teenager. Like, I can't remember the last time I went to the theater that often for a film, but it was like every time I had a good moment. And I'm a guy with 3 kids, a wife, 2.5 jobs. And I was like, you know what? I'm going back to the theater to see this movie. And I did, and I enjoyed it. I never got bored with it. I just loved it every time from beginning to end. And still, having seen it as many times as I have, there are moments where I'll walk in, it's playing, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to sit and just see how this scene goes, because I love being in this space. So once again,
I've got an M'Baku shirt upstairs right now. And
nice.
If you'd have told me 20 years ago I would have an M'Baku shirt,
right,
I would have been like, you're out of your complete mind.
Once again, speaking to, Marvel's ability to take these very zany concepts and to make them palatable, you would have never told me you could do the man-ape on screen. There's no way. And then you give me an M'Baku who I'm like, oh, I don't even want, can he be in more scenes? I don't know what the plan is for the rest of this film, but you know what I mean? I could still, his speech at the falls was like, what? You want to hand our technology?
We will not have it.
We will not have it, though.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. It was amazing cinema. So shout out to Ryan Coogler, R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman. Hit me in my heart to lose him as an actor. And very,
so we got one last chance. We'll hear him in What If.
Yeah,
like the last time.
Yeah, I know that. I'm very sad that we lost Chadwick Boseman. He was a superstar talent, and very curious about what they're going to do with World of Wakanda, or what are they called? No, World of Wakanda. World of Wakanda is the show.
Forever.
Wakanda Forever is the next film. We're probably going to get Namor. I don't know how we get Namor without a T'Challa to fight him. It doesn't.
I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do.
Right. But back to Loki and back to He Who Remains. Definitely, I will say, it speaks to Marvel's queuing up, as you said, these next, next 10 years of Marvel experiences. We've revealed, someone mentioned that Loki is the guy who revealed Thanos to us, and now he's the guy who reveals the next big bad, which is, I remember when I watched Endgame, when I was making predictions about Endgame and Infinity War, I knew that the next big bad would have to, one, defeat Hulk because of how big Hulk was in the first Avengers movie. Hulk smash was such a great moment in the film. So I knew that the next big bad was pretty much going to down Hulk in the early scenes of the movie, just to let us know he's badder than the Hulk. And I knew he was probably going to have to fight Loki, but when Loki shows up, they hit the ship that Thor and them are on from Ragnarok. I'm like, oh, okay, so we're going to get both of those things at one time, and then Loki dies, and you're like, oh no, he's bad enough to kill the trickster who's literally died in every film he's been in. And he says no resurrections this time, and Endgame happens, and no, we don't get a resurrection, and we don't even know if we're getting a fourth Thor movie at that time. So we all think, and even Tom Hiddleston said he thought, okay, Loki's done. And then they come to him and say, well, Disney wants to throw some money at us to make some television shows. So how do you feel about, 6 paychecks? And of course, Tom Hiddleston says yes.
He's burdened with glorious money.
Right. I know he's not upset about those checks at all. And we get him back in the show, and it's a different Loki than we've grown to see over the past 10 years. This is literally Avengers Loki, so this is Loki of just two experiences, 2 movies, and he's stripped bare by the TVA, literally stripped of his Asgardian leather, his fine Asgardian leather, and then emotionally and psychologically stripped of all the things he thought were powerful in the very first episode, and he now has to sort of answer for his crimes. And I remember being jazzed at the idea he's going to chase a variant of himself. And it's like, oh, okay. I'm curious to see what he's going to do with that. Like, what's this show going to be? And I remember at the end of every episode, I never had any predictions on what was going to happen next. Like, I was genuinely like, I don't know what they're going to do with this. Like,
no idea.
Like 2 or 3 episodes in, they broke the TVA. Sophie drops all those bombs, and it's like, well, this is no longer a bouncing around in time procedural. This is now a completely other thing. Her plan, that was whatever her plan all along, just went through, and now we're there. So yeah, I thought they did a good job of making an unpredictable show. And I thought they did it, like you said before, they did a good job of wrapping up so many of what were the through lines for the characters. Now, the much larger overarching thing with Kang being what it is, it could take precedence, but in reality, this is about what Loki went through from episode 1 to episode 6. And by being willing to sacrifice himself to Sylvie, he kind of had sort of closed a version of his arc.
Yep. I can totally, all that really resolved effectively. And for Loki, because Loki's such a fan favorite, there's always going to be a big push for him. Yeah. So yeah, I think Tom Hiddleston should get used to keeping his hair black for some time. Right.
And we're going to get a second season of Loki. They've already predicted of all the 3 Marvel shows. It's the only one that's getting a second season so far. and looking forward to what more they can do now that they've sort of proven they're going to go essentially literally to the end of time to tell a good story.
Yep. It's going to be a very, I like them setting the table out with lots of possible things. I'm very happy to see the opportunities that are opening up for different audiences. When we see the new Black Widow that's going to be coming on now that's essentially replaced Scarlett Johansson, when we see the other characters that are possibly stepping in the forefront, it's an engaging time because it's a smart way of passing the mantle. You don't need to rely on Robert Downey Jr. You don't need to rely on Chris Evans forever. You keep making it work, and that's again the smartness of the plan. Right.
It's a great plan. We're coming up on time to take a commercial break, so I'm going to go ahead and pause us for the cause here. And we will be back with Hannibal Tabu, and we'll talk a little bit more about Loki as a metafiction. As I said, I want to be able to talk about this show and how it really examines, protagonist-antagonist relationships. So we'll be right back with more discussion on Loki, the Disney Plus show by Marvel. And thanks for joining us. So let me tell you about Anchor Podcast. It's the podcasting service that I use. Anchor.fm is the easiest way to make a podcast, and there are many different reasons why, but foremost is it's free. So you don't need to go out and buy a whole bunch of equipment. If you have a phone or a computer and a microphone, you can record and edit your podcast right on your phone or computer. So that's one major benefit, as well as the fact that they'll distribute your podcast to several different podcasting sites for you. Not only can your podcast be found on Anchor, it can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast as well. So you don't have to worry about going to all those different sites and setting yourself up. They'll do it for you. You can also make some money on your podcast. Say you have a podcast that only 5 people listen to on a regular basis. They don't limit you on how many subscribers you have to have in order to be able to make a little bit of change for your podcast to keep yourself going. So pretty much everything you need to start a podcast can be found at Anchor.fm. So go download the app either in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or go to Anchor.fm to get started. And I guarantee you, it'll make things so much easier for you, like it has for me. Have you ever wondered why humans just aren't who we say we are? Psychologize You is a podcast by licensed psychologist Dr. Ritch Hall and licensed therapist Frank Baker. Join us as we explore why humans human the way we do. Hopefully, you'll learn a little bit about how the mind works, mental health issues, and ways to cope with this thing we call life. Weekly, wherever you get your podcasts.
Love, relationships, the church, the world as we see it today, and many more thought-provoking conversations. This season of Speak Kaya, She's Come Undone Talk Sessions. Coming to your ears soon. Keep watching.
Welcome back to the Hallspace Podcast. I'm your host, Ritch Hall, and I'm here with my good friend, Hannibal Tabu. Hannibal, say hi to the people.
Yeah.
There he is.
Yes, it's good to see you all.
Yes. The illustrious Hannibal Tabu, writer, villain extraordinaire,
Let's talk about our host, Dr. Ritch Hall. Let's not short your credentials either here.
Yes.
Slow down there, pal.
Yes. Published author Hannibal Tabu. What comment? You got WIldfire, you got the Crown series.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You'll have WIldfire. It'll be in comic book stores in November from Second Sight Publishing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a independent prose fiction illustration thing with DeMar Douglas called False Flag.
Nice.
Which will be available on Operative Network as of August 6th starting. It'll be weekly installments. There's also weekly comic book reviews of Bleeding Cool.
Yep.
I'm on the iHeartRadio podcast, Nerdorama with Mo and Tawala every week. And I'm doing a thing with Dr. Stanford Carpenter called Comic Books This Week, which is a YouTube review series that we just started doing.
Nice.
We got 2 installments of that out. So, yeah, we're just...
Nice. Also, Noir is the New Black. I got another one of your credentials over here.
I have to think because it's been a long year. I also have Noir is the New Black with Fair Square Comics, rather. That was in February. MPLS Sound with Humanoids and Joe Illidge. That was in April. And Cyberpunk with MV Media.
Yeah.
The Cyberpunk anthology, also in February. So it's been a big year, and I'm trying to keep it moving forward.
Hey. So I got famous friends, guys. Whatever.
Lightly famous. I can't, I can't get you a Nobu or anything.
Right. There was a moment, I believe, where your name was all the rage because I forget, like several comic book writers were just like sharpening their pitchforks for Hannibal because of his reviews or something. I don't remember what year that was, but that was not that long back. And I was like, hey, I know that guy.
Stop being a lot of years. You have to narrow it down.
Right. I was like, I know that guy. Stop being so mean to him. He's not as big a jerk as you think he is. I mean, kind of. He has his moments. But I'm trying to remember what year that was. But I do remember your name kind of rose a little bit because several comic book writers and creators were like anti-Hannibal Tabu in his reviews. It was like, he's reveling in this.
I have not yielded.
Right.
And clearly, I am not dead.
Right. And I knew you were loving it. I was like, he's probably loving this attention on his craft because that's genuinely why he writes some of the things he does to get people to feel feelings about it.
No, I write things for money.
Yes.
Feelings irrelevant.
I mean, but no, excellent writer. Like I said, very good friend, has given me good advice over the years, and now here to talk with me about Loki, the television show on Disney Plus. And we're talking about Loki as metafiction. And one of the reasons that this sort of came to me was because I realized, like, Kang is us. He's the guy who's watched the whole story unfold and actually knows further down the line than we do as the viewer that one day, my son's sons will be able to be essentially Kang sitting at the end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and know how it all played out. And that as a result of that, like he's literally got printed scripts of everything characters have said. And so that really struck me as what would it be like to be the guy at the end of the universe who literally knows all and knows the best way this should play out. And on the one hand, somewhat omnipotent, but on the other hand, there was a threshold where he kind of didn't know anymore, which kind of told him, oh wait, I can't. Even then, when you now you don't know anymore. Oh, that tells you something else. Also, today's the day I die, right? Like, all right, see you soon, right? Because he's
the coldest threat ever.
Right.
She was not braced for that.
She wasn't. She was
like, look, I'm an Asgardian Karen, and I'm going to complain to the management, and I'm going to get satisfaction. He was like, this is a black-owned business, man. I'm sorry. We'll see.
Right. We'll see if you get your satisfaction. And then definitely, I think they played that pretty well, where she had that look that flashed across her face when she stabbed him in the heart. And you realize, like, oh, revenge is an empty promise, right? Like, you're not really going to get what you think you are from it. And ma'am, you just ruined the Marvel universe until someone comes along to fix it. Most people are hoping it will be Doctor Strange, but I mean, I'm pretty sure at this point, cat's out of the bag, right?
There's a lot of possibilities. Kang is a big fight, and it's a big fight on multiple levels because fighting him in 1 year doesn't mean you're going to win against him in another year. So he's a multi-layered threat that, from a writing standpoint, especially now that I've written both Immortals and time travel books, is enormously attractive to me. But I almost forgot, we got Time Core from Wonder Comics.
There you go.
But anyway, so for me, watching that is going to be the layers of it. And from the Marvel side, the person who is most angry about this is the production designer. He's like, wait, I have to have complete designs, streets, cars, clothing for how many years?
Yeah.
For how many different time periods? Oh, God.
Multiple of the time periods.
That'll be fun.
Yes.
That'll be fun.
It should be. You said something there that I did want to. What is the draw for you as a writer to think about time travel and to write a time traveling villain?
In the same way of, as you say, from metafiction, it's stepping outside of things. The book that I write, Time Core, is based on an idea from, I think, third edition Dungeons and Dragons, which talked about a celestial bureaucracy, a place where what we consider as gods go to their office jobs of doing whatever it is. I'm the god of mischief. I mean, the mischief reports have got to be in. Oh shoot, we're down on mischief in the third quarter. We're gonna up our efforts,
mischief.
And there's a business to it. So
got to get that mischief out on time.
Exactly. The TVA being outside the time stream is very similar to that. So that was the first thing I was like, ooh, I like this. Yes, go here. Yeah. And it gives an opportunity to take what Doctor Who calls fixed points in time and dance around them in certain ways to create tension. It's like, am I going to ruin a fixed point in time? Of course not. It's a fixed point in time. Yeah. But and create great pathos and create great things. There's an upcoming issue of Time Core where I have Nat Turner's wife, Cherry. She's a member of this organization. And she has to work to make sure the Berlin Conference happens. That the Berlin Conference is not derailed by these chrono-anarchists. And everything in her wants to just burn everything down and stop it. And another black character is like, I understand more than anything. But if you do that, I don't happen. If I don't happen, all kinds of other things don't happen. And I understand the value of that. But do you understand the value of ending the possibility of me? Those kind of scenes you can't create in a straight linear story. You got to get layers to it.
So that's interesting, because as I remember people's criticisms in the post-Endgame world, they were very frustrated at the idea that this means now that Tony Stark has unlocked time travel, well, what in the Marvel universe does matter, because people can go back and rearrange things at their leisure, right? The idea that Captain America goes back and essentially creates a variant timeline, as we've now learned, means that, what is the narrative drive now for these stories when time travel could always just be like, we'll just fix that in post, essentially. Once again, as a meta commentary on what's happening even in the creation of films. But what you're saying is there are some things that do have to happen for time to flow a certain way, and that itself can be a drive. What's a thing that has to happen? What's a mistake that a character can't make for whatever reason? And that some of these things can't be fixed as well as we think they can.
As well, yeah, absolutely. And two other things I'll add to that. First of all, a lot of people talk about going back in time to stop something, and many times find that they're the reason why it happened in the first place.
Yes.
That kind of chronal determinism is very popular in giving characters pathos. But for me, most directly with Marvel, is that one of the next movies is Kang, as named as Kang, in Ant-Man Quantumania. What makes you think he'll let them time travel? Because when Captain America went back and put the things back, there's a way to see that as a loop that continues the sacred timeline that the TVA was charged with protecting. Yeah. Which is why they didn't step in.
Yeah.
Kang, however, is not He Who Remains. He's not. He's not. He's more of an interventionist. Yeah. He's Kang the Conqueror, not Kang the Administrator. So with that in mind, I would wager that the Avengers' ability to time travel will be drastically curtailed fairly early on in Quantumania.
Right. And so the idea that Kang's not good cop, that Immortus was the best cop we could have had, as far as we know, or He Who Remains is the best cop we could have had. Kang's not going to be that guy. He's bad cop. Which is an interesting idea. That just blossomed some thoughts in my head. Like, what happens when you have, not McNulty, Vic Mackey. What happens when Vic Mackey's your time cop?
Yeah. When Vic Mackey shows up, and then you're going to get Sipowicz from NYPD Blue as a Mortis.
Right.
And then you're going to get, it's going to start to get really complicated because these guys all have guns, and they're going to start to hate each other.
Right. They're mad at each other. They're mad at you. You know what I mean? You, common man, they want you out of the way because, you don't matter enough to the timeline for them to care. And they're going to bring a horde of Mongols with them or whatever series of, you know what I mean, famous historical warriors they can pull up from time to mess up your day and the day of others because they got a plan. And they know where they can tripwire certain aspects of the time stream.
Which means that you might be able to get your classic Red Guardian versus Captain America. You might be able to get that conflict finally, which was kind of foreshadowed in the what's name.
Yeah, in Black Widow. Yeah,
because he was like, "This is '85. I fought Captain America." He's like, Captain America was in the ice.
Was he?
Was it that Captain America? What? Because I looked at that like, oh, you're so evil, and I see you. I see you.
Yeah, maybe.
But everything is possible, and nothing can be stopped at this point. And that kind of open field is enormously attractive to me as a writer and as a creator.
Yes. And I think that, once again, that's one of the things that Marvel does really well is you think you know these stories because you think you know the comics. But in reality, they really are playing the imagination game. Whatever they kind of want to happen can happen. And they're going to do it in a way. They've been very good with the rules. That's one of the things that I do appreciate about them that is frustrating about some of these other properties that try to ape Marvel. They're not as consistent with their rules. Marvel's like, no. These are the rules. They're grounded. You think you can break them until we can break them. And even when we break them, we're breaking them in a way that still adheres to rules. There's still a conservativeship, which tells you, once again, there's essentially they have their own time guardians that are pretty much like this is the continuity that can be what it is and can't be. This is what can and can't be. Even when, hearing after Loki came out, that they had a sit down. This is the new rules for the multiverse. This is what you can and cannot do across all these properties we're creating. Once again, running a tight ship over there and doing well with.
Much better Guardians than Britney Spears got. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Too soon?
Just, that was great Hannibalism over there. I didn't see that coming. And I appreciated the cultural reference. I got that cultural reference, as Cap would say. I think one of the things that they did really well is, once again, as a writer, when you sit down with a character like Loki and you ask yourself, what would you challenge him with? Challenging Loki with the idea of free will, this chaos agent, with the idea of, is time determined? Or are you an architect of your own free will, particularly a guy who calls himself a god? That's just a brilliant stroke of what do you make this character face their own will? Are they in charge or not? And what happens when you meet the guy in charge and he still even gives you a choice? And it's like, but which choice am I making? And then the person you've been dragging through this entire story with you, another version of yourself, makes a different choice. Like, as a writer, my brain was like, oh crap, like I just saw what they did here. They made him face himself in different iterations. He saw what would happen if he got too old and too bitter and cynical. He saw what happened if he was young and actually successful. You know what I mean? Like, the writer in me was like, oh crap, like, you know how hard it is to like come up with the ability to write a story like this, like that can give you these little pieces of, where do you get all that material? It becomes the question. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and my personal method is that I synthesize influences far and wide. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why I have so many song titles as names of things.
Yeah.
The influences filter through the prism of our minds, and they come out in different shapes and different colors and different configurations.
Yes.
And that's great for me, especially when, for example, here's one thing that people were complaining about that I don't care about. People were saying, is Sylvie and Loki, that's incest. No, it's not. Their moms are literally completely different people.
Yeah.
They're the same person, but they're different people, so that's not incest.
Right.
And second, I'm not gonna lie. If I was single and there was a female version of me, it probably would not take longer than 5 minutes before I tried to make out.
Right,
I'm just going to keep it 1,000%.
My wife and I had that same conversation. She pretty much said alternate. Variant Nicole could get it. I was like, Variant Rich and Rich or Richina, we would have like a back and forth. Like, I don't know, though. I guess well, it probably happened. It probably happened.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We both know we want it. Let's just do it.
Appreciate it's me.
Yeah, right.
But putting those as the first thing that Loki really has to love, the first person that Loki really has to love, the first person he really cares for is himself. The first person he wants to be okay is himself. Yeah. The layers and the psychology there are really fitting for the character. And I'm taking it back to Dungeons & Dragons. If you play your character's choices are inevitable. Mm-hmm. They're what the character has to do. Right. And no matter what circumstance, your character will act as they must. I will do as I must, Obi-Wan. Mm-hmm. And they will carry on in the ways that are necessary to be consistent with their sense of truth. Mm-hmm. Every character here did that. No character veered from it. No character said, I'm going to be wildly out of character and do something really wild. Everybody followed their truth to the best of their ability and to sometimes really negative for them. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because Loki, as a chaos god, a mischief god, occasionally he was doing things that were unpredictable. Sylvie was, of course, very unpredictable before we knew her. What was interesting is I saw some people who were let down by her, and I thought that was interesting because it's like, no, now you just get a shape of her. When she's this character that's literally off screen most of the time having plans, you have no way of shaping who and what she is. But now that you're spending time with her, you're like, oh, she's just the person trying to pull off a plan like anybody else. And when you throw her on an apocalypse planet without a temp pad, she's out of moves, right? Like, yeah. That's the lesson of every real immortal. Sooner or later, everybody's predictable. Right. A long enough timeline. Right. If you really look at it, everybody's predictable, no matter how chaotic they are. Right. Because the concept of consciousness is a set of limitations itself. Right. It's a filtering of what's really here. Right. We can't see certain spectrums of light. We can't understand as we get older, there's a pitch of sound that we can't hear that our kids can hear. Yeah. These are intentional things that our focus becomes more and more limited as we grow into this consciousness. Mm-hmm. And even the most Huey Lewis, those who were the farthest out have gone the other way. It's hip to be square. Right. Right. So with all of those things in mind, and all those things, unfortunately, inevitably true, when you drive a character through these paces, I just want you to be okay. I have to tell you, I'm getting pruned just as I'm about to reveal my love for you. Right. And the kiss, and but I've got to do these things. Right. I'm this version of Loki, and this is my drive, and this is what's going to happen. So watching those play out from a meta standpoint is very Dungeon Master to me, very, very metatextual. Right. I often examine shows from this sort of, what is it like to watch the show? And then when I get time, particularly if I really like it, what was it like to build that out of blocks? Like, how do you go from a blank page to this thing you saw? And when you're looking at television and movies, I feel like it was Doctor Who, the show, that really taught me that. Watching them, you get a new doctor, or back when Stephen Moffat was always on the internet, you would see sometimes he's going through these struggles of, I really have to write this episode and I don't want to today. Or I thought we'd have Matt Smith for this, and we may not have Matt, like finding out they might not have had Matt Smith for the 50th anniversary. Like, they didn't have any of the doctors contractually obligated to make this episode, and they got to pull this off. It's like, well, can we get John Hurt? I think we can. Okay, now I've got a thing, right? So that these stories are themselves this solidifying of, what we consider a limitless imagination. And yet I know the struggle of staring at a blank page and trying to create something. And so it's like, how do you do that? Do you know what I mean? How do you go from, we have Loki, we have a character, he's got at this point like 8-9 films under his belt, and we're going to throw him in a situation and just see what happens. And as I said before, I think they did a masterful job at that. And then at the end, Kang is, as I said before, he's the guy who's been pulling the strings. He literally says, I paved the road, which means those 6 episodes you watched, it's what if you meet your writer at the end of your journey, right? You show up in heaven and God as he's like, well, I've been writing your journey down and I was kind of doing it on my off time. And here we are. What do you have for me? And it was interesting to me that Loki gets to that point and he's like, oh man, you're making sense. Particularly when, once again, if we go back to that first episode, Loki had just watched a version of his journey play out.
And so unlike Sylvie, who never came into contact with the TVA, so she didn't know how well they could sort of lay out your determinism, right? Like, this is how your life would play out if we let it. Sylvie had no concept of that. She just knew the TVA as this malevolent force who had ripped her out of her home and that she had to run from and manipulate. But Loki was like, oh, I've seen what they can do. And when they tell you this is what it is, I guess this is what it is, because I had a Tesseract in my hand and it was useless. And so He Who Remains spells out the story and he's like, ah, crap. Like, I guess we're out of moves.
There's a Razcast line that I quote a lot. It says, the diameter of your knowledge is the circumference of your activity. And for Loki, who the greatest powers in the universe were the Infinity Stones, and then to see them as paperweights,
right?
To see a power and technology so far beyond what he'd grown up with Asgard. But his training in Asgard was very dogmatic. We are the gods. We are at the top of the 9 realms.
Right.
We are the, this is the way things are. You are the god of mischief. He is the god of this. He can't suddenly decide he's going to be the god of hammers.
Right.
He's going to be the god of thunder and so on and so forth.
Right.
The determinism that was bred into him from his upbringing came out to play. His upbringing came out to play as, well, in the face of this overwhelming authority, I must comply. The reason why Sylvie was pruned from the timeline, you see this very briefly when she snatched his child, she was, as a child, figuring out how not to Ragnarok, how Asgardians could finally live at peace with each other and with her and with Fenrir's Wolf and with all these other forces.
Yeah.
And they were like, nope, can't let that happen.
Yeah.
So she truthfully may have been the best Loki. But with that in mind, her entire experience, her entire upbringing, her entire conditioning was about fight the TVA, beat the TVA, kill the TVA, burn the TVA. And she followed that very consistently because that was the diameter of her knowledge.
Right.
She did not see, how can I get greater power to get out of this stupid rat race?
Right.
None of them could be, as Mos Def said, they couldn't be the shot clock and be above the game. Yeah. Because they were down on the floor.
Right.
And that limitation, that like when they talk about, the thing that lives in 2 dimensions that suddenly discovers depth.
Yes.
That suddenly sees, oh my God, this is what it was all the time.
Right.
They saw that and they couldn't process it.
As most of us would, right?
Well, yeah, most of us statistically,
yes,
true.
Most. I mean, we all know Hannibal, that you would look differently upon. Yes, which is why you and I are having this conversation. It's very Grant Morrison, right? It's very what happens when you meet the writer and what do you have to say? And what do you do when you can look down over the scope of the entirety of human existence? And they say, well, you got 2 choices here. You can kill me and take over, or you could walk away now. And I can't say that I wouldn't. I mean, I have some impressions on what you would do, but I would honestly be the walk away guy, just because sometimes I know when responsibility is too great for me. Like, look, all of existence in here by myself. Can I go back? Let's just. As
somebody who's spent a lot of time deprogramming my westernized binary thought patterns, an either or choice, immediately I'm going to reject. I'm immediately going to reject almost any either or choice.
On that we agree.
Let's look at both ends. Let's see what else we can do.
Yeah.
So how about this, pal? If this is your pitch, I either kill you or walk away. How about this? I'm going to intern you. Let's intern for a couple thousand years. I'm immortal. You're immortal. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Let me take a look at the machinery, because once I do that, I may get some other ideas.
Yes.
And more importantly, I bought myself the one thing that He Who Remains already had: time.
Yeah.
I don't need to make this decision now.
Right.
You say I have to make this decision now. I don't say that.
Right.
And that is the power of choice.
Right. You blew my mind there for just a minute, because I didn't even consider the idea that you could hang out for a while and just figure out what this is really all about. And once again, the writer in me and the viewer in me are having a clash, because it's like the story always sets up, but good stories have a ticking clock, right? Sylvie is a character who has this one goal in life: to destroy the TVA or whoever is at the top of it. So much so that she killed the timekeepers with a sword and revealed the ruse. And then now that she's in front of the He Who Remains, well, he's going to have to catch this knife, right? He's got to catch this dagger. And I can understand stopping and going, wait, I remember as this moment has happened, like, can we just take a beat here and have a moment to think about it? Like, okay, so we're at the end of time. So that means we got a lot of time.
A lot.
Yeah. And once again, they do a very good narrative thing. Like Miss Minute shows up and says, I'll just give you everything you said you already wanted in episode 1. I'll just give it all to you. You'll have power and you'll have an infinity gauntlet. Wouldn't that be great? And the characters have to make that choice. Do we take all the riches that we thought we'd want, or do we continue on the path we've set on for the last 5 episodes? They say, nope, we got to meet the guy. Guy shows up and says, oh, okay, you don't want everything you've always wanted. What about this other thing? You can control it all if you want. What do you do then? Or you can kill me and unleash the bad guy. It'll look like me. It won't be me, but it'll be a bad time.
And eventually, a new me will pop up to beat the bad guy and end up here anyway.
Right.
So the second I heard that, I was like, nope, we are not playing this game.
Right. Nope. Right. I'm going to be honest. Like, me at 40, there's a time, me at 20 would have been a lot more ambitious. Like, you know what? I think I could take over. Me at 40 is like, you sound like a lot of work.
The paperwork.
Right. Dude, you created a bureaucracy. Like, I was in that building. It was an infinite building of paperwork. No, I think I'm good. What you said I could go back? Here's one ask. Can Mobius get a jet ski? If I go back, can we get a jet ski for Mobius?
Give my man a jet ski.
Right. And then I think we'll call it. It's been nice to meet you. Just let's shake on this. And well, whew.
Yeah. I wouldn't have trusted that. If you're gonna give me the blue pill and send me back into the Matrix, I wouldn't have trusted you to do it the way I asked.
Yeah.
I was like, let me intern. And in turn, then we could talk about it.
Right. I mean, it was obvious the guy was lonely up there.
Yeah.
I mean, and also, Loki also says, I'm the guy who can't be trusted. So it's like, would he trust you to intern? But he's also more powerful than you. So the longer you hang out, the more he's just going to keep getting records of what you're going to do. So you're thinking, today I'm going to show up and maybe I'll just poison his coffee for a while. Nope, he's already knows he's not drinking the coffee. Darn it. You know what I mean? Like, he was always a step ahead.
It's the lesson of the Sith. You don't kill your master until you've learned to know that you can pull it off.
You know what, Hannibal? I appreciate that you brought it back to Sith. That's once again, hand clap for the guy.
On brand. Brand.
Yeah. At the very end, on brand. Hannibal Tabu, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, we are at the end of the episode, and this has been my great pleasure. I am so glad to have you here, Hannibal Tabu, for an episode of the Hallspace Podcast to talk about Loki. It's been my pleasure, and I would gladly have you on whenever you're free, and we can make the time zone thing work. You being West Coast, me being East Coast. I would gladly love to sit down with you and talk again on more comic book related shenanigans. How about that?
I'd love to come back. I'd love it.
Yeah. So, my friend, it's been great to have you. We're going to close out. Thanks for coming. You know what the music means. Our time is up. Everybody enjoy your day. The Hallspace Podcast is brought to you by Hall Productions, LLC. Show notes and credits can be found at our webpage, thehallspacepodcast.wordpress.com. Any questions, comments, or concerns can be sent to us at thehallspacepodcast@gmail.com. The show is written by Daggerpin Davis. Music is curated by DJ Cabal. The show is produced by Chuck Jones and recorded at Slash and Trash Studios. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you all have a good week.
House Hall. We rise brilliantly.